It's slightly later. It's 8:55 p.m. on Wednesday, the 15th of February, and this is the Ask TCW podcast live. Hello and welcome to tonight's edition of the Ask TCW podcast. My name is Jono Bullard. I'm delighted to say joining me to answer some of your questions are Tina Taylor.
Hiya.
Antoine Marie-Jeanne.
Good evening.
And Andy Hayward.
Hiya.
Right, we are going to do these a little differently to normal because obviously, for those that aren't aware, the Challenge Cup semi-final second leg took place last night in Sheffield. We will come on to that in a second, but first, if you want to get in touch with us while we are on air, you can do via Twitter. It's at CatsWhiskersTV and use the hashtag AskTCW. If you've got any comments, any questions, anything about what we talk about tonight, please do get in touch with us via Twitter. We would love to hear from you. Okay, we're going to get straight on to the Challenge Cup semi-final second leg. The Sheffield Steelers, of course, were leading 2-1 from the leg in Nottingham, and they won 3-0 last night for an aggregate score of 5-1, which will see them take on the Cardiff Devils in the final at Ice Arena, Wales, on the 15th of March. Sorry, the 5th of March. And it's sometime in March anyway. So Panthers are. It's a Mickey Mouse trophy anyway. The Panthers are out of the Challenge Cup, and it's only the third time in the last 10 seasons that the Panthers haven't been part of the Challenge Cup final, which is an incredible record in itself. None of us were at the game, but we have seen the highlights, and it appears to me, and I'll very quickly ask you, but it seems like we just weren't clinical enough in front of goal, and Steelers were with the chances that they had. Andy?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, the one real gilt-edged chance that sort of springs to mind is the Stephen Schultz hitting the post, and then literally Steelers skating down the other end and scoring within like 30 seconds of it, I think, with the empty net goal. We had chances, and ultimately we've not been able to put any in the past couple of games, which I suppose in the grand scheme of things is probably a slight worry. But one of the things I mentioned earlier to you all was realistically looking at the game, it was a 2-goal game basically going into the end, and obviously it seems a lot worse. 5-1 obviously sounds bad. It sounds like a humping, but realistically, we pushed them all the way to sort of the last probably couple of minutes. It's just that, like I said, we've struggled in front of net in the past couple of games, and obviously the same in the first leg. We probably should have done better in that as well. Let's not forget the fact that we had a home game to start as well and ended up with a deficit out of that game. So I think all in all, being clinical is one of the key issues at the moment. We just need to get back to that goal scoring touch, because the past couple of games, although they've been at home and you'd probably say we'd be the underdogs in both games, realistically you'd like to see us put the puck in the net at least once or twice. But yeah, I think we've got Blaze home and away this weekend, so hopefully we'll find that scoring touch again.
I don't think it's worthy of anything more than a game penalty, to be honest.
Yeah, Tina?
Oh, who knows? Let's just spin the Doctor wheel and see where it ends up.
Andy?
2 to 4 games.
Really? You think it's going to be that many?
Yep.
Why so?
Because I think it's a pretty dumb, awful hit.
I think
basically.
I think it's a bad hit, and I think it deserved a match because Fitzgerald's in a vulnerable position and he can't defend himself. So I absolutely get why it was a match penalty. I have no complaints about that. I don't think it's a malicious hit. I don't think Brown is going in with an intent to hurt him. I think it's just he can't pull out of the check. And therefore, I just think one game will be more than sufficient. But I guess we'll see when Dops review it, I would think, in the next couple of days. It was very interesting. I got a couple of comments from Cardiff fans on my Twitter today, and they both reckon it was a nothing incident. They thought boarding at best. They didn't think it was a check to the head. I mean, I think the video shows a check to the head, but I really don't know.
That's where we disagree, because I don't think the contact is anywhere near there. It's on his shoulder at best. I think Fitzgerald's pulled a fast one, to be honest. I think he's listened to what Tomo said earlier in the season when he wanted his players to start embellishing and what have you, so they could get those calls. And well done, you've done it. You've got one of our players kicked out of the game. Not like it was needed, because we were short enough as it is.
Tina, anything to add?
No, not really. As I say, it's one of those contentious incidents that we'll just have to wait and see what the DOPS panel come out with, because we've got opinions that differ throughout the whole panel here, and I've seen differing opinions from differing fan bases that have seen it on social media today. So I think people are seeing the incident in a very different way. Obviously most of them with the orange tinted specs on are going to be thinking that there should be more of a ban for it. There's various members of other teams thinking that there should be supplementary games added to it as well. And then you've got people within our own fan base and people from other fan bases, like you said with the Cardiff fans who have got in touch with you, Jono, that it shouldn't have warranted a match in the first place. So if we've got a bunch of fairly knowledgeable and wide ranging hockey fans that have got such different opinions, then who knows what the DOPS panel's going to come up with.
We will move on, and obviously the news today that Panthers have signed a forward, David Sarkonis, a 22-year-old Latvian who played against the Panthers in the Continental Cup 3 years ago for Riga. He's been playing in the Alps Hockey League so far this season, and in 34 games, 6 goals, 23 assists for 29 points, which led his team Kitzbühel EC. Obviously, that was tempered by the news that Jason Williams will not be returning for the rest of this season, as he needs surgery onto the injury he has suffered that has kept him out for the past couple of weeks. So, Andy, massive blow that Williams won't be coming back, but Sarkonis, what's your views on him?
It's a huge blow, because not only was he probably the best player we had, the best player we had. I was going to say the best forward, but I think he was head and shoulders. He used class, and I think that's what we'll miss the most. It's not necessarily all about the point production and his goals, which were obviously fantastic, but he was a different class of player to what we've got in the rest of the lineup, and that's what we'll miss the most. The new guy, obviously, we don't know a great deal about him, but obviously, if he, how old is he? Did you say 22?
22, yeah.
And he played against us 3 years ago in a team that I know we beat at home, but they were Dynamo Riga juniors. And I believe it was only
3-1.
3-1. So they're obviously pretty talented. I imagine he's going to be pretty nippy and hopefully pretty skillful. But at the end of the day, we've been crying out for bodies. And with the news, obviously, that Williams is done for the season, and McMillan's going to be out for 2 to 3 weeks, and Dimmon's not looking like he's going to be returning any time within the next month. Anyone that's a professional hockey player could do a job for us. At the end of the day, we need to try and maintain a bit of a surge going into the playoffs. Obviously, we're out of the cup now. The league's well and truly gone. It's now about, in my opinion, it's now about entertaining the home fans at the games and trying to get some sort of steady chemistry and get some players fit and back again, so that when the playoff comes, we can try and make a bit of a push, because it's going to be our only sort of salvaging feature.
Tina, you was a big fan of Williams, so big blow.
Hashtag devastated. I mean, his points production speaks for itself. I think there were only 2 games he played where he failed to register at least a point. He was, when he was on the ice, things happened usually. I think we had a bit of a surge in our power play when he was with us, and it's not a coincidence. It's just he made things happen, and like Andy says, best player on the ice, and we're definitely going to miss him. I mean, you couple that together with the other bodies that we're going to miss, and it's that you sort of look up and down the team, and it's a little bit disheartening. But especially not seeing Williams on the team sheet for the rest of the season is that's a bit of a blow.
Hey, Ant, we'll crack on with Ask TCW for the questions that people have sent in. So thank you very much to everyone who sent questions in, and we'll start with this one from Nick Upton that relates to the signing of Sarkanis, and it's basically says, Corey apparently watched some videos on YouTube of Sarkanis. Would employing a scout be beneficial in this league as far as team recruitment is concerned? Would it be realistic? YouTube videos don't always paint the full picture.
Definitely, because I think we've jokingly said in the past, it just seems to be that Panthers only ever sign players from the one scouting network, the one agency. You've seen the benefit that Steelers have had with Tomo going over to the States, and probably having a quiet word with their coach over there to get Evan Mosey out of the Elite League as well, to make us weaker.
And did it work?
Just a little bit. I mean, you 2, 3, maybe even former players. If you've got former players that looking for work or something, maybe that's something we could get them involved with. But again, it all comes down to money, and I don't know if the Elite League has got enough money where we can afford to send 2, 3 scouts over Europe and to the States. Be great if we did.
Okay. Anybody else got anything to add to that?
Well, just quickly to sort of say, if we can't afford a decent strength and conditioning coach, then we definitely can't afford a scout.
Fair point. Andy, anything?
What I'd say is ultimately we won't have a scouting network over here while the sport is like it is. Ultimately, we rely on word of mouth and contacts in a lot of aspects, and the coaches that we have in this league will all have contacts. They will all have players that have played for them or teammates that they've played with and things like that. You think of some of the signings, and yes, it doesn't always relate to success or fantastic players, but we've signed players that have been on the recommendation of David Ling. We've signed this season 2 of Chris Lawrence's friends. Things like that. It's a relatively small pool, ice hockey, in the sense that everyone knows everyone seemingly. They've either played with or they've played against them at some point in their careers, and so because of that, you kind of have a relatively self-made and free sort of scouting hub, as it were. It will never get to the stage where you've got 3 or 4 scouts going to different games across Europe or in the States and stuff, because we're not that kind of league. We're miles away from things like that.
Okay. Right, we will move on to the next question, and thank you very much to Nick for yours. And this comes from Ian Irwin, and it's one that we got yesterday via email, so I sent it all over to you because it's a bit of a long one, and one that you probably need to have a bit of think about. So it goes: the benefits of goal line technology are obvious to all and a true step in sensible progressive direction. But was it the correct problem to address? How many occasions do we have where the play around the net is truly in question? Maybe every few games or so. And what is the net effect of that on the outcome of the game? He goes on to say about his vantage point is on the blue line in front of block 5, and Ian reckons that blue line technology would have a much bigger impact in the fair outcome of the game. So what Ian is suggesting is cameras on the blue line to check on offsides. He also goes on to say, so could an on-ice two-man ref system, 2 officials off ice with line duties plus 2 goal judges act as a way to improve the officiating experience? So quite a lot to talk about in that question. So Andy, we'll start with you.
Well, I think on paper it sounds quite good. I mean, obviously, if you're going to go into the realms of fantasy, you could say, well, we should have 4 officials on the ice and two officials watching for offsides, off the ice, But I just think personally, from a standpoint that we are a small ice hockey league in a big world of professional ice hockey leagues and teams, and I just think that we're probably not the best place to try and push to be pioneers in something like that. I do know obviously that there will be times when a goal is called offside or a goal has been given and they're clearly offside or they seem to be offside, but I think realistically, I'm not too sure how it would work. Would it work like the Challengers system, or is it just a case of they would have 2 officials off the ice who would have a whistle, and then you've got to delve into the realms of if you were sat on a vantage point and you've got some pillock in a stripy shirt blowing a whistle down your tab hole every 5 minutes, you'd be pretty naffed off. So I just think there's too many sort of intangibles in it. I know, obviously, one of the things I kind of completely agree with him with the goal line technology. I do think it should come in, and I do think it should be used. But he's right. How many occasions do you get in a year in Nottingham? How many occasions do you get where you truly need it? Probably a handful. But because of the impact of those decisions, it is needed. Obviously, the last home game we had against Sheffield, there was a case for goal line technology. But it's a good theory. I just don't think it would be implemented because I think there's too many tangibles involved, and B, if it was going to be implemented, I don't think we're probably the right sort of league to be saying, hey, everyone follow our lead, look at what we're doing.
Okay, Tina?
Yeah, I can't really stray too far from Andy's opinion, to be honest. I think reinventing the wheel is a little bit much for our little league, I'm afraid. I can see where the thinking process is, because to all intents and purposes, what the linesmen do, can be. I suppose some of it, can be sort of redistributed, if you will, to a static official. But I think you do still benefit from having, those officials. I mean, to be honest, yeah, fine. Goal line technology and the 4-man system seem to be consistently hot topics, and I think those are the 2 things that we should probably be focusing on as a league, because I don't think that it just comes back to, I think it's just too much to do. We're behind when it comes to officiating and all things sort of technical. in terms of assisting officiating. So I think completely overhauling it would be far too much. And I think we need to learn to walk before we can run, basically.
Okay. And anything to add?
Not really. I'd rather go. I like the idea in principle, but I'd rather just go for a 4-man system and be done with it.
I mean, I personally, I don't have a problem with his suggestion. And the thing is, blue line technology, as he puts it, it's only going to take 4 GoPro cameras and then someone off the ice. But I suppose my theory would be, would it affect the flow of the game because you've not got a linesman actually there on the ice blowing the whistle straight away? You're leaving it to people off the ice, and I think that could affect the flow of the game. So I think it's a great idea, but I think it's something that's probably further down the line. But I don't think it would take a lot to implement personally. Okay, but Ian, thanks for taking the time to email us with your question. The next one, and this is going to be a bit of a meaty one, and it comes from Mbop on the Cage. He says, should Corey Nielsen's 2-year contract be terminated at the end of the season? I'm not going to direct it to someone. I'll let one of you come in. So who wants to come in first on that?
I'll go.
Okay.
No.
and here endeth the sermon from the Reverend Haywood.
Any elaboration, Andy?
Again, it's like a lot of these things. Realistically, who else do you get?
Yeah, and that would be my argument as well.
Who comes in realistically? Let's be honest. Looking at the history of this club, it would be David Clarke. Now, I've got nothing against David Clarke, and potentially he could be the world's greatest coach for all we know. But once again, we'd be left to go right back to the drawing board with another probably player coach in his rookie season. Corey's not without his faults. I'm sure he knows that. But realistically, I don't really know who else we get. Obviously, Paul Adey's name's always mentioned, but would he come back? Do you think, considering how he left? I don't know. Maybe they say time's a healer. Maybe the length of time that it's been, maybe it has been. But I just think he's got another year left on his contract. Whether people like it or not, he's won another trophy this year. He's making him our most successful coach for trophies. Yes, it's not the league trophy that everyone would like, but we're still winning things. And realistically, before we had him, we were only winning the odd thing. And with him now, at least we're winning something regularly every year, and we are getting that bit of success that we craved during the dark days.
Okay. Anyone else want to come in on that?
For me, no, I wouldn't, unless there was a complete clear out higher up as well, in which case I probably would let him go and just start completely from afresh.
Okay.
I'll be honest, I think that's probably a little bit too severe for my liking. But I would definitely agree with Andy that I don't think the Panthers organisation want to be terminating Corey Nielsen's contract. But if he doesn't start getting some support, then that decision may get taken out of their hands. It feels very much like it's been a very long, laboured domestic season, and it feels like it genuinely feels like it's been hard work for the coaching staff of the Nottingham Panthers. And I'll come back to it again. It feels like there has been no support for the coaching staff. Just look at the replacements that we haven't had, which in previous years we probably would have had, or we have. Go back to the, in inverted commas, checkbook hockey season. We were getting replacements, 10 to the dozen. So
to be fair, the year that we were in the Continental Cup with Riga, with this kid that we've signed today, it was like a revolving door of imports that year. Yeah, we were still rubbish.
Yeah. I mean that.
Two words: Chogramolding.
Well,
and I'll leave
it just sort of sets up the argument for the just inconsistency in the team, and not being able to get any rapport with your teammates because you don't know who you're going to be playing with, on the same ice pad, never mind the same line week on week. I mean that sort of brings that into it. But you just cannot take away from the fact that we're looking at another season where injuries have just rattled through the team and nothing has been done to replace it. It's just been never mind. It's unlucky, but do your best out there, lads. And then it's just a which came first, the injury to the defenseman or the injury to the forward who had to go back and do his minutes. So it's no. It is the simple answer to the question. But in terms of recruitment, I agree with Andy. With the Panthers organisation and their history, if Corey Nielsen was to leave or / be fired, then you're probably looking at David Clarke stepping up to take the head coach's job. However, I think a team like the Nottingham Panthers, I'd like to think there'd be a few CVs rolling in, but what you can tell from CVs is anybody's guess. It's it depends what kind of team they've got available to them, and how much of a hand they have in the recruiting, I suppose. But no, is the quick answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and same for me. I think I've been consistent with this all season. No, I'm with you, Tina. I don't think he's had the support from up above. So I think he's doing the best with what he's got. And I know there'll be a lot of people listening to this who's probably screaming at the recording now, telling me I'm wrong. But it's a case of be careful what you wish for, because if Corey Nielsen goes or he's sacked, I don't think there's anyone to replace him, because I don't think anyone would come in to replace him. I mean, realistically, you're not going to get an NHL or AHL coach. So it's probably going to be a rookie again, and like Andy said, you're going back to the start. So for me, I think it would be utterly pointless for the contract to be terminated at the end of the season. So
just to extend this bit, I just think we need something to change, whether it be the coach or up above, because it's been so stale for so long. Since we won the league, we've gone downhill. I don't think you can sack him based on this season's performance, because, like we've mentioned before, he's met his targets. He was given his target of winning the Continental Cup. We've won it. But something needs to change for me.
Okay. Fair enough. So another question, but this one is directed at me. So Tina.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Now this is from apparently an anonymous Steelers fan. You keyboard warrior, you should name yourself. But anyway, thank you for taking
Helen,
the time.
wasn't
it? It wasn't. No, it wasn't Helen actually.
if it was Helen, she'd have just asked him outright. End of story. But yes. Jono, this Steelers fan wants to know, why don't you rate Irvin's Mustakovs when he is clearly the best netminder in the league? So kind of contentious.
Well, anonymous keyboard warrior. Not even. I mean, normally I wouldn't even entertain this, because you're not even brave enough to put your name to it, which is cowardly, frankly. But as there was something kicked off on social media last night, so I will answer it. Why don't I rate him? Because I just don't think he's very good. And I never rated him the first time he came, and I don't rate him now. I think he gives away too many rebounds. He doesn't look confident in his net. You look on Saturday, you could probably put 3 or 4 of Panthers' goals down to him. The Steven Schultz one, he absolutely could do nothing about. I accept that. But the first one, he pokes straight onto Brian McGrattan's stick. Brian McGrattan's second, he's flapping away on the ice like a cart that Mark Twait's just landed. And the David Clarke one just goes straight through him. And I just think he gives away far too many uncontrolled rebounds straight up in the slot. And if you think he is clearly the best netminder in the league, then I think you ought to get yourself an appointment at Boots Opticians, my friend, because he's not even close. You're third in the league, and I honestly think if you had Mika Vietman playing for you this season, you would be top. There we go.
Well, I mean, just to add to that, just imagine where they would be if they had somebody, who's facing the amount of shots that Shane Owen does.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a guy who is seeing an awful lot of rubber. He is seeing, on average, the most shots on goal in the elite league, and he's still bringing wins.
Doesn't always work like that. I mean, they signed Kevin Reiter from Basingstoke, who was having like 70 shots a game against them and conceding 6 or 7 goals a game. And when they signed him, his shots were being reduced because the defence was so much better, but the goals were still going in. And Coventry had the same issue of, was it JF Paras from Edinburgh? It's some netminders thrive on the amount of shots, and I've no slight against Shane Owen at all, because whenever I've seen him, he's been absolutely spectacular, and some of the saves he made in that last Fife game particularly were stunning. But I think there's more to it than just look at this guy who's facing all these shots. You know, he would do a better job. I think, you know, we've seen before with sometimes it works. You know, we signed Michelle Robinson halfway through a year from Edinburgh, and you know, the general consensus when we signed him was, why have we signed Edinburgh's netminder when he was sacked from Edinburgh because they were losing all these games? And then it turned out that with the defence in front of him, he was quite good. And then obviously we had the flip side with Rasta in his first year when no one knew what he was about. He was fantastic. And then we changed the defensive corps in front of him, and he's found out the next season, and realistically the second season he was pretty poor.
I mean, well, what are your guys' views on Mustakovs? I mean, obviously I've quite clearly given mine, but do you agree, disagree?
I don't rate him. I've never rated him. I'm similar to you, Jono. He's all right. You know, I'm not saying he's the worst keeper in the world. But the stats don't lie, and he's the third best keeper according to the Elite League stats, or the second best keeper according to the save percentage. So the best keeper in the Elite League, I'm sorry, Steeler anonymous person, you're wrong. He's not the best keeper in the league according to the stats. Ben Bounds is.
Yeah, he's not the best netminder in the league by a long stretch, and I do think that he's incredibly temperamental, and I do think that you could class him as dodgy, but by the same token, he's kind of effective as well. In a you know, at the end of the day, they're third in the league. He's third on the goals against. You know, he's unorthodox. He's probably not technically fantastic, but he does a job. And you know, I wouldn't particularly want him here at all, and I think that we've certainly got a better netminder in Wheatman. But you know, like I said, a lot of it's down to the team as well. If you give up lots of rebounds in the slot, you better hope that you've got defensemen in front of you that are going to deal with it.
Yeah, and I think that's possibly one of the things that has helped Mustakovs in the fact that his defence have got used to what they have to deal with from him. You know, when he's making a save, there's a genuine possibility that you're going to have to be responsible for getting that puck out of the way, so the rebound doesn't fall to the opposition. So, yeah, I don't think he's not. I don't think he's terrible, but I wouldn't trade the Steelers for him. I would rather have Wheatman than the Mustakovs.
Okay, we shall move on to the next question. Comes from Max Artis, and he says, what questions would you like Neil Black to answer in his upcoming Q&A at Saltbox? Anyone?
Well, I kind of feel like it's how long have you got? And you know, like we've touched on previously, it's going to be an hour long, and I don't think that's long enough. I think there's going to be an awful lot of questions being fired at Neil Black personally. For me, I think, you know, I mean, I feel like we've talked about this before, but you know, on the back of us doing a webcast over in Italy, why are we not looking to do a webcast? Because, you know, Neil Black's teams are the only ones that don't do them now. Even Manchester have pulled their finger out and got it sorted before we have. And also, you know, as this season's rolled on, this question has come more and more to the forefront of my mind. Why has the coach not had the support this season that he has had in previous seasons?
Yeah. Okay. Ant, what would you ask?
I don't I've got loads of questions that I want to have. I just hope that he doesn't get asked all this daft wishy-washy questions like, which one's your favourite player? What do you like to have on a Sunday morning? You know what? I hope it's none of that crap. But likewise, I don't want it to be some, you know, people standing there and having a right go. I just hope people are sensible enough to ask decent questions, and hopefully Neil will be able to answer a fair few. And I hope this is the first in a long line of things like this, to be fair.
Okay, Andy?
London and the KHL, and potentially what impact that has on Brayhead and ourselves, if he is involved. But one of the questions, sort of on a personal level, and you know, I'm not expecting any preferential treatment, but how come we are routinely ignored when we request things and others aren't? Basically,
yeah.
We found out this week that
whiskers, I guess.
Yeah. You know, we found out this week that there's an interview with, is it Wheatman?
Yeah.
On a independent fan zine thing. You know, and apparently they asked the right people. But you know, if emailing pretty much every single member of the Panthers staff week in, week out isn't the right people, then I personally, I don't know who is. So, you know, what is the crack there?
Yeah. Okay. I think for me, the one thing I would like to know is why, with our resources, our building, our fan base, the money coming in, are we not the best at everything in the Elite League? Because I think we should be the pinnacle. We should be the team that every other one looks up to and goes, you know what, I want to be like them. And I'm not talking about just on ice, I'm talking off ice, media, engagement with fans, everything. We should be the absolute best with the resources we have and the facilities we have. We should be number one, and we are nowhere near at all. We are lagging way behind, and I would like to ask him, why is that? And also, is that not embarrassing to him?
I agree, and I hope you get to ask that question, Jono.
One final thing I'd like him to answer is how much the inflatable bear cost. I'd love to know how much that thing cost.
Oh, and can we have a new video wall?
I think that's the arena, though, from what... So, I'd love a new video wall, but I do think that is an arena issue rather than a Panthers one. Okay. So, I hope that's answered your question, Max, and we'll move on. This one comes from Dave Arrowsmith, and he says, are Panthers the Arsenal of British ice hockey? Perennial bridesmaid, same coach for years, with many saying it's time he left, seemingly spending less on new signings than others, making fewer signings. I could go on. So, Ant, as our resident Manchester United fan, boo, what do you reckon to Panthers being Arsenal?
We finished fourth and we win a cup.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we are. It's sad. We won a league title.
Could it be argued, though, that Arsenal compete every season?
Well, they do till about Christmas, which is eerily familiar. You know, they're getting pumped tonight by Bayern Munich. They're going out of the Champions League in the usual stage. the similarities are very, very close. Let's put it that way. I know Gary used to talk about us being the Manchester United of ice hockey, but like you said, there's we're nowhere close.
No, you've got to win. You've got to win a league title once, more than twice in 57 years to be considered the Manchester United.
I mean, I'd say we're more like Man United are now. Well, I'd say under Moyes or Van Gaal than we are the Man United of old. But it's eerily familiar that we finish fourth, we win a cup, coach keeps his job. We generally start well and then fade away at Christmas time.
I mean, I must admit, I remember Dave Sims describing us as Arsenal, I think, earlier this season, maybe in the close season. So, Andy, does it have parallels?
It does to a point, but it also doesn't. Arsenal don't win trophies as regularly as we do, by any stretch. Yes, they'll win the odd cup here and there, but what is it? 10 years Corey's been here, and 17 trophies now.
Yeah,
something along those lines. Arsenal have got a long way to go to sort of get that kind of record, but I appreciate there are other similarities. But ultimately, I'm sure there's a team in every league, in most sports, probably in every sport, that sort of fits that criteria. The team that is always going to be relatively comfortable of finishing in a respectable league position, winning trophies, but never really competing long enough in the league. It was, to be fair, this year we were compared to Leicester because we were doing well in Europe, but we're poor in the league. So,
but we're not going to get relegated.
Well, no, because we haven't got relegation in the league. But we've. I said at one of the earlier podcasts when it was relatively doom and gloom that we would finish in the top four, which seemed to get questioned a bit. I still think we will because of the resources and the fact that the club that we are. I don't doubt that we're probably nowhere near as good as what we perhaps should be, but I still think every year that we will safely be in the top four. I can't ever think of a time where I've thought at the start of the season, this isn't good enough. We're going to be sixth or we're going to be fifth. We will always be there or thereabouts.
Okay. A couple of questions that have come from the cage, and we'll start off with this one by Shorty. He says, why has our bad league form led to the derision of the Continental Cup and the suggestion that the Alps Hockey League, Metal League and Kazakhstan Hockey Championships, League Magnus and the Ukrainian Hockey League are akin to the Gardner Conference and EPL? And is there any substance to this? So, Tina, you kick us off.
Well, I think there's a certain perception that exists with the Continental Cup these days because of all the best teams in Europe going to the Champions Hockey League. So obviously the competition in the Continental Cup is of a slightly lower level, but my limited experience with the Continental Cup, I don't think the standard has dropped too much. I mean, if you sort of take the example of us from 3 years ago when we were in the Continental Cup, I don't think the standard was all that different. I mean, you can definitely make a case that we did not belong in that second round. We definitely did not belong there. But
I will take you back to when the Steelers were in the final in 2010, and they had an Italian team, a French team, and I think they had an Eastern European team as well, which was pretty much the same as us when we went and won it. So it's not changed all that much as far as I'm concerned.
I think ultimately there's only been a couple of teams that have sort of, with that next sort of step on the class and ability roster, that have sort of dropped out of it in my eyes. I sort of think back to like Rouen when we were playing like Red Bull Salzburg and stuff, and they turned up on their Red Bull Salzburg coach, and they'd all got matching suits and tracksuits, and it was all the kit was all on a trailer on the back of a bus that was all emblazoned with Red Bull Salzburg. They looked like a professional hockey team, like you would expect in that kind of country. We turned up on a skills coach or Silverdale or whatever it was, and they sort of stagger off and do a bit of a warm up before they go on, and they were quite clearly a lot better than everybody else that weekend. But obviously, there are now other tournaments available that these teams can go into. I might be wrong, but there was never. Am I right in thinking that there was never any mass Swedish teams in the Continental Cup or anything like that?
There may have been earlier on, but I don't think they were when.
It's always sort of been like sort of. I don't know. I've always imagined, but it's always been sort of like French and Italian.
Yeah, I think there might have been. I think there might have been DEL teams in it at one time, but
right,
but not.
Because obviously, when we first, I don't know if it was the first one or not, but when we went to Amiens, obviously it was a Slovenian team, an Italian team, and obviously Amiens, the French team. And it's to me, it's still a relatively similar standard. Yes, they've added in a few, the extra round that we had to play in this season, and then obviously the year that it was in Nottingham, one of the teams couldn't get visas or something, so we had that Spanish team.
Yeah.
Bipolo came over. So there are obviously weaker teams as well that are involved in it now. But I certainly don't think that it's the overall tournament has been weakened, and I certainly don't think it should detract from the fact that we've won it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think if you take the Continental Cup in isolation, it's still an absolutely incredible achievement that we won it, especially considering we had to go three rounds all away from the UK to win it. So we had the round in Spain, the round in Denmark, and then the round in Italy. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, not only that, but we've had to negate the officials as well. Historically, the British teams have fallen foul because of the officials, and we didn't seem to create any problems for ourselves this season.
No, not at all. And I mean, yes, the league, the domestic season has been bloody dire, absolutely bloody dire, and there's no argument about that. But that shouldn't take away from what a magnificent achievement it was to win the Continental Cup. We are still the first British team to do it, and no other team will be able to say that. And I think it's probably just a shame that we won it this season with the domestic form being so dire, because I think it has taken the shine off it a bit, but it shouldn't, because it's still an incredible achievement as far as I'm concerned. Okay, we will move on. And the next question, and it's from Dill1015, also on the cage. He says, based on press releases, do you think the club are in denial about the on-ice situation, or are they actively misleading fans? From my point of view, what is written in the press releases about games is widely different from what I and others are seeing on the ice. The second leg in Sheffield was a great example of this. Tina?
I think the problem is that often in the press releases there is a tendency to over-focus on the positives. It's almost like if they present the PR, if the PR presents the games in any sort of negative fashion towards the Panthers, that it won't attract new fans, and that seems. I don't think the press releases are really what is bringing the fans in. I think there's been Well, I mean, I don't really know. I mean, apparently there's, at last look, there's less than 1,000 tickets left for Saturday's game. How? It's certainly not down to the on ice performances, because they've been woefully inconsistent. So, you have to somewhere in the Panthers organisation, the bums on seats, is being achieved, but I don't think it's in any part down to those press releases and so we were unlucky and we didn't get the bounces, and the various things like that. I think that I mean that's all it is for me. I think there's just too much of an emphasis on on the positives and there's too much of an emphasis on not dwelling on the parts of the game that didn't go so well for the Panthers. I think, I'm sure there's a way of writing the press releases with the optimism and enthusiasm, but also with a bit, a touch more honesty, because I think we need it.
Okay,
I don't think we have a proper match report. I think it's more an advertising tool, unfortunately. I'd rather read Matt Davis's match reports in the Nottingham Post than I would the ones on the Panthers website now. It's quite sad, really.
Okay, fair enough. And we'll move on to another one. This also comes from the Cage, from Panther D-Man. He says, Mike Ellis won the playoffs, then the Cup, and was told .500 hockey wasn't good enough. He was sacked in 2008. How far have we progressed since then? Andy?
Well, a fair bit. We've won the league, we've won the Continental Cup, and we've consistently won more trophies than seasons.
Yeah, I think it should be pointed out. I'll point out very quickly that Mike Ellis was the first Panthers coach to win trophies in consecutive seasons. It had not been done before in the modern era, before Mike Ellis. So, yeah, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, and that was, at the time, it was incredible, and at the time it was quite a shock that he'd been released, and it was the general consensus was that it was a mistake. We'd sacked a coach who'd brought us some success, which we hadn't had since Kemal Roos, and we'd replaced him with a player who was making his first season in coaching, and it just seemed like a backward step, and it seemed odd at the time. But I think realistically, I think we have progressed, and I think we have improved. We've become, yes, we haven't won the league as often as we would like, but we have won it now. And realistically, Corey himself has created somewhat of a dynasty with regards to trophies. Yes, like I say, it would be nice if it was a couple more league trophies in there. But like you mentioned earlier, be careful what you wish for. I've not been going, nearly as long as you have, Jono. But in my first few seasons, we didn't win anything, and obviously then there was the spell between Kemal Roos before we won anything again. And then since that year with Mike Ellis, we've seemingly won something every year, seemingly at the very least. And obviously, some years we've won 2, and some years we've won 3. So we have progressed, but I still think there's an awful lot more room for improvement.
And
conspiracy theorists point to something else happening rather than him being released for .50 hockey.
Yeah,
releasing of a certain player.
Gassing the general manager's son is not really a good career option, to be honest. But I get what Dan's saying. In that, have we progressed? Yes, we have, because we won the league, and we're consistently winning trophies every season, like Andy said. It was really before my time, though. It was literally Mike Ellis's last season was my first proper full season, so I'm not in any position really to talk about what it was like before then. I'm just known success. It's been great. Okay, fair enough. We will move on to our last couple of questions, and this next one comes from Richard Sisson. He says, with Stevie Lee assisting 2 goals in 2 games for the opposing team, is it time he went, or does he still have a future with the Panthers? Tina.
I think he's definitely got a future with the Panthers. He's a good, solid British deep man. I mean, he's had a couple of ropey games. So sue him. We've had many players who have had a couple of ropey games, and I could reel names off till the end of the night. But I think the trouble is that Stevie Lee's concussions have changed the way that he plays. Stevie Lee used to be, one of those. I will. I mean, to a certain extent, he still stands up for players, for his teammates, but he's less likely to get into an altercation. He's not. I can remember my first Scottish trip, and I still have no idea what the reason for it was, but Stevie Lee lined up next to Danny Stewart in Fife and in the face-off circle, and then proceeded to absolutely punch the life out of him. I mean, he took a few good ones himself, but it was as I recall, a fairly convincing win for Lee, and that was the kind of player he used to be. But post-concussion, Stevie Lee has to be a little bit more careful because with the concussions that he's had, his next one could be the end of his career if he's not careful. So I think the problem is he's had to change the way he plays, and I imagine he doesn't like it. I imagine it doesn't really sit well with him because that's not the type of player he grew up being. So I think it's probably it probably has been and probably will continue to be a difficult adjustment for him to make. He's trying. I think one of the things that stood out about Lee was his willingness to get involved and stick up for his teammates, but he can't afford to be that guy now, unfortunately. So he's, fine. He's had a couple of dodgy games. I mean, he's not the only one this season. We've had plenty of players who have had dodgy games consecutively as well. So it's just difficult as well. I mean, if you just put into the mix as well the fact that our defensive injuries have really hit us hard. And so I imagine, I haven't been counting, I haven't been really watching, but I imagine he's racking up a truckload of minutes. And if you're playing anything over like 25 minutes a game, then the concentration is going to dip a little bit. So, don't shoot him. Don't shoot him just based on the fact that he's had a couple of howlers, because it happens. I'm sure once if we get to the point where we've got some bodies, I'm sure he's not going to be making those mistakes again.
Andy, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the thing is as well, and it sort of harps back onto the point I made about Nielsen, is realistically, we hear the same thing every year about the Brit players. Lacko's underperformed. Stevie Lee's not as good as he used to be. David Clarke's always injured and hasn't been as prolific as he used to be. All these things, but we're forgetting that there is a very limited pool of British players, because they're all locked up and tied up with clubs because of their importance. And so, again, like the thing with Nielsen is do we get rid of Stevie Lee? Okay, but then who replaces him? Who do we get that comes in that can do a job? And I completely agree with Tina. There will be one person who feels that mistake more than anybody else, more than any of the fans, and that'll be Stevie Lee himself. You're telling me that when that pass behind the net fell to the Steelers player's stick, that he didn't automatically think, I've I've made a mistake here, or the empty net goal yesterday. You're telling me that he didn't feel bad about the fact that in front of all them people, it will be down as his error that led to that goal. He will feel that more than anybody else, and that's something that I think a lot of people are overlooking. Is these are human beings, and yes, as paying fans, we have a right to air our opinions, but I just think a lot of the stuff that's been aimed at him this season, last season, has been really, really harsh. Like we said, the bodies that were missing, the amount of ice time that he's getting, the fact that he's had to change his game because of his injuries. There are a lot of reasons why Stevie Lee 2017 isn't as not necessarily good, but isn't as favourable as Stevie Lee circa 2009, 2010, when he was younger, more aggressive, he was injury free. These things happen in a physical sport, and at the age of 26, I think he's 26, 25, 26. At that age, knowing that potentially you're one bad hit or one fight away from having to retire at that age because of your concussions, he's got to be careful. He's got to look after himself in his job. And I had a conversation with someone on Saturday who was saying that he's underperformed and it's time we should let go, and there's no room for I can't quite remember the word. There's no room for sentiment in sport, and that you need to move on. But again, who do you replace him with? And I genuinely, and I know a lot of people won't agree with him, I genuinely don't see him as one of the big issues on this team or on the team last season. I don't see any of the Brits really as that much of a problem. Yes, it'd be nice if Lacko would got 25 goals this year, but he still does a job. And yes, it would be nice if Stevie Lee was throwing the hits that he was throwing and dropping the gloves and getting more points and not making errors like he's made in his past couple of games. But they're doing a job, and it all comes down to Brit resource. If we get rid of them, we can only replace them with so many imports before we end up being even shorter bench than what we already are. So who else do we get in? And let's face it, out of a core of British defencemen, he would still walk into that GB squad. So who else do you replace him with?
Yeah. Okay. We'll move on to our final question, and this comes from Josh Noy, and he says, with this season's results, does it show that we need to sign younger players from Europe and not ex-NHL stars, or a mix? Ant?
I'd rather have a mix, to be fair. I like the physical game myself. I'm not keen on the no contact diving all over the place embellishment rubbish that you tend to get. But yeah, I like to see, likewise, I'm hoping this Sarkanis is as good as I remember him being in the Continental Cup, because I think he's going to open up a few doors for us. It's too late in the season to make any effect on the league, but we've still got the playoffs, I guess. I'd go for a mix, in short, instead of rambling on.
Tina?
Yeah, it's all about balance. You've got to get the right guys in at the right time, and get them playing together. So you get the best of what's available if you can, and if that means you go to Europe, then you go to Europe. But you have to know what you're dealing with. I think maybe I think the beginning of this season that I don't know if it was Corey Nielsen saying it himself or if somebody said it about him, that he sort of got the CV of Eric Lindhagen and he knew absolutely nothing about him because he doesn't really have any contacts over in Europe. He doesn't have anybody he really knows over there. So all of his his people are in North America. So I think you have to go with what you know as well. There's a certain amount of having to know, because if you don't have people that you can trust, then how do you know that they're not sort of buttering your bread a little bit to take a player? The players that you are being offered may not be the right fit for your team and what you're trying to do with your team. So I personally am less concerned about where the players come from, more their ability and their desire when they get here.
Okay, final word to you, Ant.
He's already been.
Sorry, Andy. Apologies.
What I will say is that for every Eric Lindhagen, where you dip into the European market and find a gem, there's probably a Yuri Golicic or a Robert Liskach, and there's probably more of them than there are the gems. So to touch on Tina's point, you've got to go with roughly what you know, and I think ultimately one of the things that's key is not necessarily about whether you should have younger or European or older. It's about how the coach wants to have a team play and getting the players that fit that way of playing. With a coach like Corey, you're always going to have an emphasis on the North American style, because that's how he's played the game. That's how he's been brought up on the game. That's how he sees the game. That doesn't mean that he won't sign European players, but there will always be that emphasis on having North American guys. To go on to the question and sort of pick at it, as the question is worded, on a personal note, I would rather have the old ex-NHL players than the younger European players, mainly because realistically this season, in my eyes, and again, it kind of gets contradicted because Eric Lindhagen's been fantastic and hasn't put a foot wrong, but the two players for me that have been absolutely superb and exemplary have been Jason Williams, who's been different class since he came in, and it's obviously we've touched on the fact that he's now out for the season, and Brian McGran, who's been head and shoulders better than anyone would have expected. And yes, most people expected that he'd get more points than Cam did last year, but he's on 17 goals this season already. He's been absolutely superb, and you need a balance. But these guys have played, and they know what it takes to play in the top league in the world, and having that kind of experience is completely invaluable.
Okay, thank you very much, and I think for tonight we will leave it there. Thank you very much to those of you who sent questions in. If we haven't asked your question, I'm very sorry, but obviously we only have so much time available to us to ask the questions, but please continue to send your questions in to us via Twitter, Facebook, The Cage, or email, which is tcwonlinetv@gmail.com. No show tomorrow, so don't forget that this weekend we were playing the Coventry Blaze at home on Saturday, which will be the final Saturday home match of the season, 7pm face-off at the NIC, and the Sky Dome in Coventry on Sunday with a 5:15pm face-off, and a webcast will be available from Clean Cut Sports, so check that out if you can't get down to the Sky Dome. All that remains left to be said is thank you very much to Antoine Marie-Jeanne.
Not a problem. Take care, peeps.
Tina Taylor.
TTFN.
And Andy Haywood.
Good night.
Thank you very much for listening, and we will speak to you on Monday on the next TCW podcast.